What did you say it was?
Mark chapter 5. We'll be in Mark chapter 5, and we'll be technically starting with verse 18. It's kind of the middle of a story, but last week was one of those that we could have gone till about 12:30, Terry. uh, Last week we were talking about Jesus casting out a demon. Yeah, just the kind of some of the things that go along with Jesus casting them out. And I want to make it really clear that I believe God can work in that same way today. But I also want to make it clear that a lot of what goes on that way in our world today is as phony as the day is long. It's just plain ridiculous. Paul?
The things that I see when I look at the news and everything else is absolutely demonic.
It is. It is.
It's the worst that it's ever been.
Um, I want to look at the result of this today, and I think that'll prove that a lot of what we see going on in our world today is phony. Okay? There's an outcome. When Jesus cast out this demon, there was a purpose for it. Okay? You had a guy that you couldn't tame. He had tried, he had worked at it. You know, people had chained him up. They tried to get him to get things squared away, and they couldn't do it. And he was constantly, perpetually able to break the chains. He was able to free himself from any attempt at getting better until Jesus came along. Until Jesus came along. And I will say this again, I don't believe that the demon made him run up to Jesus. I think previous attempts had made him run up to Jesus. Now there's some discussion as to whether, who he was talking to at what given point. I'm not confirmed on any of it. I have my ideas, and that's, I guess, the way it's going to have to be. Because we don't know. I mean, there's three different he's that are being talked about in this passage. One is Jesus. One is the demoniac person, for which we're never given a name, and then the demon himself. And it's hard to know sometimes when he says, and he told him, and he did this or he did that. It's hard to know. Jesus, I don't think, had a fight with the man, so I think any fighting that went on was with the demon himself. But I really believe that he ran to Jesus asking for help because he needed help. And I'd suggest he knew it. I would suggest he knew it. Well, we get down, that takes us down through verse 17. And if you remember, we ended with Jesus getting ready to get into a boat and go back to the other side. He came over to show what happened. Now, today, we're going to look at the end result of this happening, and you'll not find this to be the case except for the rare occasion anymore. Okay? What he did was a whole different thing. It's where Jesus, it says, and when he, speaking of Jesus, got into the boat, he who had been, past tense, demon possessed, begged him that he might be with him. Okay, what happens when, I'm going to pick on him just because I know I can. Geno Jennings supposedly wipes out casts a demon out of somebody. Geno Jennings gets praised. You ought to watch some of his stuff on YouTube in particular. I mean, it's scary. It really is a messed up thing, the way he does what he does. Another situation that this Bethel Church. We all know about Bethel Church, right? Down in Reading. Um, Bill Johnson had a lady come in, and she and Bill and their prophet. Come on, brain. Chris Vallot. There it is. I got a name back. I can't believe I did that. Chris Vallot and all had this service, and there were people just lying on the floor, writhing in pain, talking about burning, and you don't see in this the man being afraid ever. Okay, but they were asking these people that were going through these problems, "Are you afraid?" "Yes, I'm afraid." "Yes, I'm afraid." And well, let this fear do its work and this kind of thing. And it's like an hour long, and this one kid was laying there just almost to death, being tormented. Was it demonic? Yes. Very much so. What?
I thought those were them acting like they had a demon.
I don't think the one was, Diana. I don't think that boy was. I think he was truly going through. You'd have to see the video to understand what I'm saying. I mean, he was in absolute torment. And they did nothing. But they called it a, what do they call it? No, they have a different word for it, a something service, and it's, oh, come on, brain.
Healing service?
Huh? Yeah, well, might as well be called that, yeah, a demon service. But where they're casting out demons and whatnot, and they do it in large groups, and they'll even do what they call a mass job of it, where everybody in there is just released of all their demons. I've heard of people having the demon of a cold. I've heard of them having the demon of an earache, the demon of a sore back. Mom, maybe that's what we need to do, is cast out a demon from you. I'm kidding. I'm truly kidding. But here's the thing. All this goes on. Now, does that mean that God can't cast out demons today? Not at all. Okay, but there was something that happened. This guy wanted now to be with Jesus. And you don't see that. You see followers of Benny Hinn, you see followers of Geno Jennings, you see followers of Mike Todd, you see followers of Todd White, you see followers. I mean, all these people have their followers, and they come in droves. And I could give you example after example and after example of ones that are doing it falsely. And interestingly enough, there's only a few examples of real. There's only a few. Why? Because God doesn't do it much anymore? No, it's because everybody wants to do it in a phony, baloney way. That's just how they do it. This guy wanted to be with Jesus. He didn't want to follow somebody else. He wanted to follow Jesus. Well, listen to what Jesus told him. However, Jesus did not permit him. This is verse 19. However, Jesus did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you, and how he has had compassion on you." There you have it. We're going to see that's what he... Well, can I just read the next verse with it, and then we'll back up. And he departed and began to proclaim in Decapolis all that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled. He went from being a demoniac, living in tombs, in a horrible way, to a missionary. And that's not what happens in our world today. Not very often. Belan, in the Philippines, when there's demonic activity, do people cast out demons there successfully? Okay. God can do it. God is perfectly capable of doing it. And I think a lot of times we look at it today and we go, well, that person's just on drugs. Well, why? What was the one kid's name that was back here talking about how he was hollering at his demons and stuff? What was his name?
Jeremy Buckland?
Yeah, Jeremy Buckland. There it is. Yeah. You know, I think he was coming looking for help. But it's pretty easy to go, well, you've done it to yourself. Notice what he told him to do. Go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he had compassion on you. Now remember, what is compassion? It's the display of love. Otherwise it's good works, and I admit there's a lot of good works that goes around. But compassion is a display of love. I care about you enough that I'm going to do something to help you have a better relationship with God. That's compassion. That's compassion. And,
Can I preface something?
mm-hmm.
When the people came and saw what the Lord had done, they said, "Get out of here."
Yep,
But
absolutely.
he wanted to stay with Jesus.
Yeah.
So that's the reaction a lot of times. Not so much, we have a lot of, like you're saying, a lot of phony stuff going on, and people rejoicing over what they're seeing, but they didn't. They said, "Get out of here. We don't want you around."
Absolutely. It's interesting that brought up a thought. I know it's not quite the same, but one of them that healed a guy. I felt so sorry for the guy. He was in a wheelchair, and he was pretty well crippled up. I don't remember for sure which one it was, but it seems like it might have been T.D. Jakes. Went up and walloped him on the side of the head and knocked him out of his wheelchair in a healing way. And there he laid on the floor, and guess what they marched around with? The wheelchair. While he struggled to get himself up against that thing, edge like that, and he got up against that, and he was kind of walking along, and they were all walking around holding this wheelchair up as though it was like...
Not needed anymore?
Well, it was like it was the thing to be praised. He's out of the wheelchair. And here's this guy still over here struggling to walk and make any headway at all. He couldn't do it on his own. I mean, he couldn't walk like you or me. What a tragedy. What a fake thing. And here you see Jesus, and you're absolutely right. They didn't want, and this actually comes into play. They didn't want Jesus to stick around. Okay, they wanted him gone. Get out of here. You might add to it, and don't come back. Get out and stay out. Well, what was he supposed to do? He was supposed to go back to these same people that wanted Jesus gone and evangelize them. How many of them do you suppose wanted to hear? Paul, we've talked about this. John, we've talked about this, where they don't want to hear it. It didn't change what Jesus called him to do, but they didn't want to hear it. And that's the same thing we see today. Why? Because they'd rather see the
enemy.
The miracles. They'd rather see the demonic. They'd rather see all these different things that are bad And all the while, somebody's saying, well, the one who did it is Jesus. See, I was lame. I was dead. The Bible says I was completely dead in my trespasses and sins. And he brought me back to life because I was crucified with him. And I live. I don't want to hear that. Doesn't matter. I know this to be the case. They don't want to hear about the miracle worker. They want to see the miracles. And it doesn't matter. Can Satan perform miracles? Yes. John?
Yeah, when they asked Jesus for, that we wanted some signs, he said, the only sign you're going to get is the sign of Jonah.
Yeah. I'm going to die, be buried, and rise again.
Yeah, the only sign.
And it's sad. It's sad. How many of you would say that it's something besides Jesus that saved you? Paul?
You know what it is today? I'll tell you in just 2 sentences. Bad is good, and good is bad.
Of course. That's when you get rid of God, you make your own God, and when your own God is selfishness and lust, what do you
I'm
expect?
pointing out that that's where we're at in Revelations.
Yeah, I agree.
We're there.
And he departed and began to proclaim in Decapolis all that Jesus had done for him. And what does it say? All marveled. Now notice what it doesn't say. All believed. It doesn't say that.
Yeah, they don't.
It doesn't say that because that's not what happened. Something so blatant as to have a man who's completely engaged in the demonic be turned from that demonic activity to Christ. And all they do is marvel. Wow. Some of them got so good at it they could say it backwards, as old Mike Warnke used to say. Wow. What a tragedy. And you see the people not caring because they done run Jesus off. Now what about in our society today? I can remember back when I was a kid it was okay to pray in school.
It isn't now.
Let me tell you one thing, Paul, it kind of is. You just can't do it openly.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, you know what it is? They hate God.
They hate God. You turn your back on God
Absolutely.
and something else happens.
And add to that, if you can, it's secretly is one thing, but they promote more religion that's anti-Christian.
Okay. And again, this week I heard time after time people calling Christianity a religion. I'm so glad it's not religious. I'm not religious at all. Well, I am to a degree. I get up in the morning, I drink a lot of coffee. I do what I need to do. I do it religiously. But I have a relationship with Jesus. And that's what makes the difference. He's my dad. He's my groom. He's everything that I could possibly want. He is. I'm not saying you're Jesus. I'm not. I won't put you in that category. Sorry. But he is. He is, really. And that's what makes the difference. When I stand before him, I'm covered with his blood. And my sins are forgiven. I've been washed clean. How sweet is that? Paul?
Just real quick, one of the saddest things that I ever heard in my life, I'm driving down the road with my sister in the car, and my sister turns around and looks at me and goes, Paul, Christianity's a bad thing. Now I worship Buddha.
Good for her. No, I'm saying that very sarcastically.
Imagine how I felt. And then she took me to where they actually worship it, and I saw what they did.
Yep.
I couldn't believe it.
Been there and done that, Paul, up in Kent,
It broke
Washington.
my heart.
In Kent, Washington. I literally saw him bowing down to a statue,
I see
a
it.
golden statue.
That's right.
I imagine that's pretty prominent over in the Philippines as well, too, right? The idol worshiping Yeah.
Buddha, Allah, yeah, happens.
And they all want more gods. They want more gods. I got to be careful. I could go down the wrong path. I want to get into this next story because it shows something else. Okay.
I gotta do this.
Okay.
So, it's gonna kick me out later, but one person, this demoniac,
Yeah.
went into the Decapolis. Now, if you go to chapter 6, verse 53, Jesus comes back to this area.
Yeah.
And what do? They bring all their people to get healed.
Yep.
He
Yeah.
goes, but he doesn't just go on the shore. He goes into the cities, and they can't wait to get. Oh, somebody's going to touch his garment, or
Yeah.
somebody's going to. All of a sudden, things have changed.
Yep. Yep.
One guy.
Well,
one guy.
and it's because he did what Jesus told him to do.
Yeah.
We're going to see that. I mean, let me just, before we get into this next section, how long do you suppose that whole incident took?
Oh,
I'm-
probably days, because he had legions of.
Well, when
But yeah, for God, it only takes a few seconds.
when it was all said and done, he got in the boat, crossed over to the area where this demoniac was, told the demon to get out, and then told this guy to go
You get
tell
it.
his friends. You know,
No,
what's that?
I was going to say, he told the demons to get out, and I want you to get out.
Yeah.
To go back.
And so you have basically a little bit of time. Well, then Jesus got back in the boat. Let me get to the right side. Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. Okay, why would a great multitude gather to him there? Because it was probably the same multitude that had gathered to him before on that side. And what did they want to see? Miracles. Did they want somebody who could save them? I don't think so. Because they would look at the physical, and how often is that our main goal, is to look at the physical? We might throw in a quick prayer for kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids for salvation as generically as we possibly can. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I'm just hear me out with this. Hear me out with this. We might throw in somebody we know from town once in a while. But most of what we pray for is the physical. We're no different than these people. Coming to Jesus for the physical. What's going to happen with the physical? We're going to leave it someday. It's gone. Paul, you've talked about it a number of times. I want out,
Yeah.
Why? Because this physical is tough.
And this place is so evil and hateful. And
Of
there's
course.
endless wars.
And so we know what's ahead, but I concern over my physical, or I concern over your physical. You understand where I'm going with this? It's not that I have a problem with praying for that stuff. Because does Jesus care? Yes. Absolutely he cares. But we need to be getting into the grit of the thing. And if we aren't going to open our mouths and tell them about Jesus, then we need to be praying for them that somebody would. I'm going to illustrate that with an illustration that I've probably used here before. I have a nephew that grew up apart from God. He had nothing to do with God. And he had a girlfriend, and she didn't do anything to help him spiritually. And we were over here praying. His mom doesn't like me. That's a whole nother story. I won't get into it, but she doesn't like me. And so she would keep me from having contact with the family. That's okay. But we were praying back here that somebody would be able to step into their life. My brother's family's life. He's got my brother, his wife, a son, and a daughter. Okay. And one day we found out that old Jonathan had accepted Christ, and it was a jaw dropper. We weren't expecting it. So here's the story that happened. He broke up with this girl. That was his girlfriend. And he found another girlfriend. Well, come to find out, she was a pastor's daughter of an evangelical Bible-believing church. They hung out, and in the long run, my brother and his whole family went to their house for Thanksgiving, and it made such an impact on him that it not only turned Jonathan to Christ, but it turned Jim to Christ as well. You know why? Because we opened our mouth, right? No. Because somebody else did, because we couldn't. We weren't there to do it. Why do I mean, if we were all we were doing was praying for the physical over there, would that have happened? I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, somebody else might have been praying for the family as well. I don't know. But if we were just praying, Jim had a back surgery, and he had a hernia surgery, and he had all these different surgeries and different ailments and stuff like that. If that's all we were praying about, would he have come to Christ, come back to God? No, probably not. We sat back here, and he wept tears over wasted years. Now, if that doesn't take I prayed for years for this to happen. He and I didn't get along that great as kids. And the only thing that made us kind of come together at all was kind of a bad situation. But I'd been praying for this guy for years. And then to sit back here like that, oh man, I didn't know what to do. Here's the thing. Again, if we just prayed for the physical, if we were just after the physical, what would have happened? Well, that's not what these guys did. They wanted the physical. They wanted the miracles. Except for one guy. I kind of think he had the right idea. Even though we're going to see it this way, I hope you'll understand where I'm going with it. I'm going to read 21 and 22 together. Now when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on. I'm going to relate this in a spiritual way. He came earnestly seeking help. And he came to the one who could help. And he said, there's this little girl, my little girl, at the point of death. Now go back and think for a second. Everybody, according to Romans, is dead in their trespasses and sins. And we go to Jesus and go, well, save this one, save that one. Pray for my kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids. And God's going, what's up with that? Here's somebody who came earnestly. There's a point of death going on here. And he came to the one who could heal her. I have held for long years, maybe even alone in my belief to this regard, that we need to pray specifically. Pray specifically, not generically. Well, we'd be praying all day long. Good. Good. These people, we need to come to the one who, and trust the one who can heal them, make them go from dead to alive. Yes, this is a physical story, but I believe it shows something of Jesus. Just like he cares about us as far as the demonic activity, but also the death of, that all men are in.
The Lord said he gave Jezebel plenty of time to repent.
Uh-huh.
Hey, I mean, he gives people time. Someone, apparently she didn't hear the good news, or she just decided to get, she had a lot of time to make up her mind.
Yeah.
The Lord.
Well, and let's see what he does with it. Well, first, it was a ruler of the synagogue, came, fell at his feet, begged him earnestly, says, "Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed and she will live." So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. We want to see, we want to see, we want to see, we want to see. This is going to be a neat circus trick. Watch this, it's going to happen. Now, how much of that do you see in our world today? Go see how small of a church you can get Benny Hinn into, or Smiling Joel,
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
or any of these that, I mean, that come with a false gospel. Huge, because they won't all fit. I mean, they have 40,000 people gathered together. Does God need that? No. They want to see the miracles. I know the lady. She was her name was Mrs. Worley, and I don't remember her first name. She lived up in Rochester, and I helped her for a number of years. She was in a wheelchair. I got to drive her van. I think that was probably one of the most intriguing things about her. She had this van that you had to drive with your hands. Gas, everything, and brakes, the whole 9 yards was done with your hands. It was pretty neat. I used to drive that. I'd have to load her rascal scooter or whatever it was up and take her to a place and have it adjusted or stuff like that. And I got to drive that into town. That was pretty fun. I enjoyed that. But she told me one day, and I went over to her house, and we were sitting there talking, and she said, "Well, I did go to try to get healed. Benny Hinn was down in Portland, and I went, and you know what he did? He refused to even see me." And it broke her heart. She wanted to be healed. And so I was able to tell her, I know the one that can heal you, if he so chooses. But you're going to leave this life, and she since has. You're going to leave this life, and what really matters is your heart. You'll be made anew. Pain and suffering will be gone. And it was a comfort to her, and she was cheered up slightly from it. But she was just the sweetest lady. She used to try to pay me to come over and help, and I wouldn't take any pay for it because it wasn't something I really thought was appropriate to be paid for. But what a blessing.
Back in the 80s, my daughter took me down to Sacramento to see Benny Hinn with that,
Yeah.
and they called for people that maybe, had something wrong to be.
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
And so my daughter said, "Go up there and get down the line." So I did. And somebody came along and says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I've come to get a healing. I went back with really bad, doesn't braces all the time."
Yeah.
And she says, "Well, you can't get in this line unless they give you a number." So they pick people out ahead of time and give them a number.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
It's all phony baloney.
Well, and here's the sad part. People are flocking to that when they should be flocking to Jesus. Is this not Christianity 101? I mean, it's not the tough stuff. They're going for these miracles, and the miracles are believed. David, quickly.
I was thinking about this recently, how one of the big problems is that people were trying to paint Christianity off as something that can't really be done, like the popes or anything else. You have to do certain spells or incantations, even in Christian, like with the snakes or being baptized and all kinds of stuff, so much more difficult than just praying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Christianity is not difficult. If it was difficult, we couldn't do it. We wouldn't do it. I'm going to jump past a story in this, and I'm going to pick up this story on the other end of it. Then we'll come back hopefully next week and pick up the story that I'm jumping over, because it's kind of a sidelight and we don't have a huge amount of time. Now remember, he just came off of probably that morning, and he came off of casting out that demon. Now he's back over here on the other side. I don't have any idea how long it takes in a boat to go on from one side to the other there. I guess that's irrelevant. I'm guessing it's still the same day, and all this is still happening. Okay.
Back then, it probably depended on which direction the wind was blowing.
A lot of it, yeah. We're going to jump down to verse 35. While he was still speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, who said, "Your daughter is dead." Heartbreak. How many of you have lost a loved one? We all have. How fun is it? What's wrong with the situation? They're dead. They're dead. And what do? We get totally concerned over that. Now go into Romans 5, Romans 3, Romans 6, where it's talking about our sin and what it does to us. And we've got a loved one who is dead because of it. And it doesn't do that to us. It doesn't break us. We should be near weeping over these people, if not actually weeping over these people who are lost and dead in their trespasses and sins. But the problem is we don't much care about that. We care about the physical. Jesus is going to overcome this in a heartbeat. As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid, only believe." And he permitted no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Then he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and saw a tumult and those who wept and wailed loudly. And he came in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weep? Why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." They ridiculed him. But when he had put them all outside, he took the father and the mother of the child and those who were with him, and he entered where the child was laying. And he said to the child, he took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cumi," which is translated, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl arose and walked. Okay, so now you have somebody who's dead, and somebody whose faith. I mean, did the girl have faith? No. That's one thing that this is something that Benny Hinn and all of those like that will say. It's because you don't have enough faith if you're not healed. This girl didn't have faith at all. And Jesus told her, "Get up and rise," and she did. Once was dead, now I'm alive. Okay, he'd cast out a demon that morning. Now he'd cast out, or made a girl from dead to alive. When I talk about Jesus raising anybody from the dead, the first person that's going to come to mind is Lazarus. That's where we go all the time. What about this girl? What about this girl? He told the dad, "Don't be upset. Just believe. Just believe. Believe what? That Jesus can make the dead alive. Did she want to hear it? Probably not. Did she care whether she heard it? Probably not. But when Jesus said, "Get up," what did she do? She got up. That's the other side of the coin that we miss most often. We pray with an out. We don't pray believing. Jesus said this, you pray and you ask, but you don't have because you ask amiss. Do we not care of the dead that are eternally destined for hell? And we care more about the physical than the reality of it. They're going to die. Whether they accept Christ or not, they're going to die. The day before Christmas, somebody died over on, well, here in town. I don't remember exactly where it was now. I don't know the man that died. I didn't know. I don't know if I've ever even heard his name, other than what I saw on the TV. I mean, on the paper. But he wasn't expecting to die. I wonder about his heart. We weren't expecting Fred to die. We weren't expecting any of these people to die. How about what's her name? Mooch's sister, Brenda's husband, Steve. We weren't expecting him to die. You know, none of these we were expecting to die. And they do. Now, how many of these out here are guaranteed tomorrow or today? None of them. And what do? We sit back and we go, well, I'm not going to take him to the one that I know can heal, can bring this guy back from the dead. I'm not talking about the physical, I'm talking about the spiritual. We have all the answers we need. If you know enough to be saved, you know enough to tell others. If you're saved by an incorrect gospel, you better shut up. But if you know enough to actually be saved, you know enough to tell others. And that's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. Jesus brought this little girl back with no faith on her part at all. What about no faith on that person's part? Can Jesus work? You bet. Maybe that's just the little bit that they need. It's our faith that's faltering, and we don't go out and tell anybody. And we sit in a church happy that there's 15 people in here or whatever. In a town of 1,000 people. Why do we do this? I think sometimes it's because we don't care enough. We'll do our part and we'll pray generically. I pray for those that are not saved in our community. Okay. Well, what do? We're supposed to be a light. We're supposed to be the example that would bring people to Jesus. And we go out and we live however we want to live. I don't think so. People would say maybe I'm reading into this and making too much of it, but I don't believe I am. I don't believe I am. The problem we have in our church today is we don't want to do the work. We just want to sit back and pray as generically as we can. I'll pray specifically for, well, like when, and I don't see this as a real problem, when Dad fell and mashed his head, you know, or messed his wrist all up. Pray for those things specifically, but I'll pray generically for the salvation of others. Why is that? Oh, that we would be people who would not, I mean, I'd rather pray generically for the physical and pray more specifically for those that are dead spiritually.
Well, I can give you an answer to that question. Is everybody, all the time, needs help with their soul. But when your dad fell, he only needed it for that specific time, and you knew that.
Okay, but my,
Where was that?
Ruby, my point is,
I know what your point is.
my point is simply this, that if we would care enough about, I don't know, Dan, Betty, I don't know, I'm throwing names out, Jim, you know, that I actually step in and do something and pray specifically for that person. And I mean, it wouldn't have happened if it were not for us praying specifically for Jim and his family, that God would touch that family. If it was just thrown in with the rest of the generic ones, why do you think none of the other ones are being answered? Because we have a special market on God? No. Because for some reason we were praying specifically for him. And we don't see it with a lot of the other ones because it's just as generic as it could possibly be. I see it in my own family. I could go on about this. I shouldn't. I hope it's not too agenda related, because I'm not trying to do it by any agenda. I'm trying to get a point across with this, that we need to be praying for those that are lost, and then not only doing that, but bringing them to Jesus or Jesus to them. In this case, it was the guy went and got Jesus and brought him to the girl, and she was raised. Can we bring Jesus to the people? Yes, and we better be doing it. I've had talks with Milan, and I so appreciate your heart, because it's that way. Bring Jesus to the people. Oh, that we would have that idea and do it. People have said, well, they don't care how much you say or care what you say until they know how much you care. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm not doing it to impress people, and we ought not do it to impress people, but rather that we would show them Jesus so that they can come to the one who's going to resurrect them. If anybody's going to do it, it's him. Buddha can't do it. Krishna can't do it. Tsao can't do it. How many more? How many more? The Watchtower Society can't do it. The Pope can't do it. I think it's funny that all these people that have gone along saying that Catholics are every whit Christian and all of that are starting to backpedal on it because of the Pope. It's like, dude, he's nothing different than any of the other ones. He's not at all. He's got some idiot ideas that's changing their church, but he's no different than the other ones. He still considers himself God. And he can't do a blessed thing. Take a person to the Pope and see if they can be spiritually resurrected or physically resurrected. See if it can happen. Man can't do it. Jesus can. Let's take Jesus to the people. The dead to be raised. If they can't come to Jesus, we'll take Jesus to them. That's my idea. And we need to do it. I've gone on long enough. I gotta shut up. I'm sorry if it's too much. I don't mean it that way. I do appreciate your input this morning. It makes it easier for me because it's just helpful. And so, let me just say this as we close. If you're ready to step up to the job with me, then let's get out there and do the job. So let's stop waiting. Let's be a light. All the lighthouses and the lighthouse and all that, the lighthouse up here. And yet our light has gone out almost as far as the community. We need to get out there and strike it up and get it going so that others will see and believe. Oh, that's her. Okay. Couldn't figure out what I was hearing. Let's close with prayer. Lord, thank you for your love, for dying for each one of us so that we could live. And I pray that as we've looked at this story, I know we didn't do it a whole lot of justice, but Lord, I pray that you would help us to understand who you are and what it's all about. We need others to see you and believe. Thank you for what you're going to do in your name. Amen.